What's up, fellas? Good to see you, everybody, again for another episode of the Blind Pig, courtesy of BGObsession.com. Happy to see everybody again after our second preseason game. Real quick with the intros, the wonking contradiction in the top left is Boone. He's also named John. Bottom left is Paul. He hails as Canadian Hog. Bottom right is Mark, better known as Ohm. Top right is Bob, better known as Neophyte. And I am Derek, and you can find me at Silent Threat. So please get on the board, mix it up. We've got contests going. We've talked about it the last few weeks. BGO Pick'em went live over the last 7 days, so the first 4 weeks have been loaded. More entries are rolling in on the crystal ball pool, and some of the other things we've got going on are gaining some ground. Plus, I think we need one more person for our BGO Fantasy League.
Correct.
And it's going to be first come, first serve. That person will bring the league to 12 teams, which is fun. 10 is a little bit loaded. 14 is a little bit diluted. So 12 seems to be that sweet spot. So
if we
join.
Find anyone, we're going to make Mark do it. So
yeah, didn't you try that last year or 2 years ago, and you ended up having to do my team for me? So I commit to a lot of things. That one I've just never really committed to.
So yeah, jump on, mix it up. We like to have some fun. So I guess a couple things that we wanted to talk about. Sam Howell has been getting a lot of national love over the last 24 hours, and I don't know how to feel about it. Kind of excited because the national love is not, it seems warranted. I like it. I'm interested in how you guys felt. I know we came out of that game feeling pretty positive about Sam Howell's game, and we can dig into that deeper. But first, what's your reaction to the national love? Like, how are you guys feeling about that?
Well, when it's Kay Adams who's given the national love, I all I can muster is jealousy, because that's what I got.
Mm-hmm.
Kay Adams was like raving about Sam Howell today, and I think she's just a big fan of him as a player, and in
a person.
Yeah, maybe.
I have no problem with the national love. I just, in this room, none of us are taking that for anything more than what it is they're seeing what we're seeing, and he seems like a likable kid and a good story, and maybe Washington actually has a quarterback. We'll see. But as of now, the returns, he's done everything that you could have asked him to do at every step so far in his career. And if he keeps on that trajectory, then that national love is going to be warranted.
I will say that it's very, very refreshing to hear that kind of stuff, because all we've ever been hearing for 24 years is this team basically being dragged through the mud, and for all the right reasons. But it's really, really nice and refreshing to hear some of our players that are taking the football field be embraced and be celebrated for all the right reasons. So, you know what? I'm just going to run with it, and hopefully Sam Howell runs with it too. And, hopefully he has an awesome season.
I took it all with a grain of salt until a couple of days ago, and I opened up YouTube. And I guess it's because of what I've been watching in the algorithm, right? Feeds me more of what it's, what it thinks you're interested in. And so I've started getting some national sports stuff that maybe I wouldn't normally get. And in some cases, some fantasy based stuff. And Matthew Berry was like all over Sam Howell as a fantasy pick. He's not taking him as his QB1, but it's the first time I have seen a Washington quarterback legitimately in the discussion about serious QB2 picks for a long time. And he very candidly said, look, he's a solid QB2 for me at the moment. And if he keeps playing the way he's playing, he's going to surprise some people. And he may very well end up being a QB1 by the end of the season, depending upon how deep your league is. Which just really kind of, it's fantasy football. Take it for what it's worth, right? But to be considered a QB1 in this league, you got to be putting up some righteous numbers, not just with your arm, but also somewhat with your legs. And I was just kind of, that to me was oddly enough, a little bit of validation that, because the fantasy guys don't start talking about you until they think you're really going to do something.
Was anyone else surprised or shocked, I guess, at how complimentary Troy Aikman was on Monday night?
A little bit.
I mean, he was really not only complimentary of like some of the talent that we have, especially in offense, but he said a lot of nice things about Hal. And I kind of cringe every time Aikman is covering one of our games, because although I think he does a pretty good job generally, he's always beating on us, even more than we beat on us. So anyway, that kind of got my attention.
You know, John, I've always come down on the other side. You and I have discussed this a couple of times. I've always felt like Aikman is fairly even-handed. Actually, you want to see him beat on a team? You watch a Dallas game that Aikman's calling, and the Dallas fans call him out on it all the time. But I think he over-rotates when he calls a Dallas game because he doesn't want to be called a homer. And so he's really kind of, man, he's harsh on the Cowboys. There's some days that I think he's harsh on the Cowboys. But I enjoyed what he was saying the other night. I thought it was awesome.
Bob, not to be a wet blanket, just to the original point, Matthew Berry is a big time Commanders fan.
Oh, I know, but he's never done this with a Washington.
He never
quarterback
talks
before.
about Commanders players in fantasy, so it is bucking the trend.
Yeah,
But
I think the only thing he would worry about is if Hal had like a little bit of Baker Mayfield in him, you know, and you don't want him spending more time like doing commercials than looking at the playbook.
But he doesn't strike me as that kind of a guy.
I don't think it's not gonna go to his head. He just doesn't seem like he's got that kind of mentality.
No, because they've interviewed him, and every time they talk complimentary about it, he's talking about the team. But then when they're critical, he's always says, I have to be better. I have to do my job.
Yeah, he clearly went to the Nuke LaLoosh school of how to talk to the press. But I think that might be the whole cool customer thing off the field translates on the field. It's the way he plays the game, where he never overreacts or seems to get overexcited one way or the other. It's very even keel, and that carries over to interviews. You kind of wonder what he's like off the field, like just with his buds on the weekend. It's hard for me to picture what this guy's really like, because he's almost like that old West character, right? He's all laconic and even voice and never seems to get too excited. It's been fun to watch. It's going to be a lot of fun. This is what I wanted to ask you guys. You think we'll see him on the field this weekend against Cincinnati?
I don't think so.
Hope not.
I'm not sure we're going to see any starters. We may not see a whole lot of second stringers on Saturday. It's going to be.
I don't think so.
It's going to be a big glorified scrimmage with a bunch of names you don't know.
Well, Brissett was apparently taking reps with the ones today, and he hasn't done that all camp.
Who was?
Brissett.
Well, yeah, he needs to work. He looked terribly.
Yeah. I mean, Fromm looked better than Brissett.
Somebody mentioned today, before we move off of Hal, that he's only 22, which I knew he was young. Obviously, we just drafted him, but I didn't realize he was that young. And then it explains something, though, because I think he was actually clean shaven in the last game, which I've never seen him. And he looked, I don't know if anyone else noticed, but he looked like 3 years younger without that 5 o'clock shadow.
Well, shit, maybe I'll try that.
That's really important football, knowledge going out there.
It's imperative to the game.
Well, apparently Kay Adams favors clean-shaven men.
Rich Eisen did 6 minutes on his haircut. I mean,
oh, I missed that one. I'll have to check.
Oh yeah, you got to go find it. Rich Eisen did it. They did a whole thing about his mop top, and because his official team photo, his hair's pretty kind of all over the place. And Eisen finally came to the conclusion that because he's playing on a rookie contract and he's a 5th round pick, he didn't have enough money for hair gel. So we'll know he's made it, in 2 or 3 years when his hair's slicked back and he looks all professional.
You know who he is? He's the anti-Zach Wilson. You guys been watching the Hard Knocks?
No.
Zach Wilson is, oh my God, he's just like, and this isn't fair to Zach Wilson because I don't know really anything about his background, but he comes across as the privileged country club boy and rich frat boy thing and he acts that way and kind of looks that way, and he's bubbly and over the top and all I could think about when I was watching that episode was our quarterback is the actual opposite of everything that Zach Wilson is. I'm going to take that as a good thing.
Yeah.
You got any concerns, Paul, about all the attention he's getting?
that Sam Howell is getting? No, I think we have a strong enough coaching staff, and in particular, Bieniemy. I think he's going to go a long way towards keeping the kid level-headed. I think Bieniemy has made it very, very clear since he's come in here that this team has to be willing to work and do uncomfortable things in order to achieve the level of greatness that Bieniemy has experienced with the Chiefs. So I think that Eric Bieniemy being in Sam Howell's ear all year, he's not going to let the kid's head get inflated. I think he's going to keep him on the straight and narrow, and keep him in the right headspace to basically be humble and to continue to work to achieve what we need to achieve. Because quite honestly, the kid hasn't achieved anything yet. We haven't seen him. Well, we saw him in one game at the end of last season, but when the real live bullets start flying on September 10th? No, the 11th maybe. Regardless, that will be the true test. So yeah, I think Bieniemy is going to be really important in that regard.
And when he has that rookie game that he's going to have at some point, where he throws a couple picks, makes a couple bad decisions, with Eric Bieniemy waiting for him on the sidelines, that'll be interesting to watch.
I'm your overly competitive brother. Check.
Freaking ESPN. Apologies.
That was awesome. Oh, that was
So
great.
the actual, I'm just looking at Sam's numbers. Because I know people are listening to this. Almost, I guarantee you they all saw the game, and they're probably wondering if we saw the same thing they did. But what my takeaway was from Sam Howell in that game, the real takeaway is the arm strength jumps out again on those intermediate passes, 15 to 20, which we haven't had in our arsenal a whole lot in the last 30 years. A guy who can hit that regularly,
especially outside the hash markets. We've had some guys that could hit 20 in between the hashes, but
yeah,
get outside the numbers.
Probably, you're probably talking Trent Green that far back,
but not with the kind of velocity that Sam's at. And I guess my real point is that I suspect that after a while we'll get used to it. But right now, watching the ball come out of his hand, those 25-yarders aren't getting more than 4 or 5 yards off the ground. They're on a line, they're tight spirals, and more importantly, they're accurate. Guys aren't reaching for him, reaching down, up. He's hitting people on the shoulders.
I'm a bear. I'm coming out of hibernation.
All right, we're done here.
He's also got the ability to go across his body to the other side of the field, which not that we necessarily love that move, but he's done it a couple times already in the preseason where he's moving to the right and he turns and whips one to the left it looks like he's set and planted.
That was the fourth down play in the first preseason game, right? When he rolling right and he hit Turner across body and he threw it kind of almost behind him, but it was on such a line.
He did it in this game too, but he got away from what looked like a sure sack and went out and found Jahan Dotson 15, 20 yards downfield. Didn't panic, and threw a dart right to the guy's chest. That's really what impresses me is the accuracy. I think I didn't expect that. He's hitting guys in stride, which I think John commented on the first time we saw him last year. That none of that's changed, and I find that very encouraging.
He played a half of football, and 5 of his passes were 16 yards or longer. I mean, that's something that we don't see normally. If we're doing well in the passing game in the past years, it's dinking and dunking and maybe one deep shot downfield. He literally completed 5 passes in the 20-yard range in one half. That's pretty impressive.
The one that stood out to you, talk about his accuracy. Accuracy when you're looking at the guy is one thing. It feels to me like he knows where his receivers are, even when he's not looking at them. One of those plays, and I want to say it followed a sack. He was looking back off to his left. He was looking for somebody on his left, and he finally decided he didn't like anything he saw over there. And he came back, and as soon as his head picked up Cole Turner, the ball was gone. And I mean, he didn't look at Turner for more than a split second, but he knew exactly where he was coming back to and hit him. And I thought, man, he's got he's got a map in his head, is what it felt like to me. And he really understands not the first couple of routes, but the totality of what's supposed to be happening. It feels like he's got a handle on Bieniemy's offense at the moment. Now, the question is, how much of the offense is Eric giving him? And I have no clue what the answer to that question is.
Well, not much, but and that's the part we can't quantify, right? We have heard inferentially during the course of camp and the first part of the preseason suggestions that Sam's actually very good and gotten very good with the playbook very quickly. We can't know that. I guess all we can go is with what people are saying. But Bob, I agree. When you see him on the field, it looks like he's comfortable, not just on the field, but in the offense.
Yeah.
And does know where his what do they call him? His options are when things go bad. He seems to be finding, and with those two exceptions, with the 2 sacks, which he said that those are both on him for one holding it too long while he rolled around on the first one, and on the second one, apparently just didn't recognize and make the right call to adjust the offensive line. And so he didn't account for the free guy. But those exceptions stand out, right? The rest of the time, he looks like he knows exactly where to go with the ball.
Yep.
So with all the positive praise that we are throwing in Sam Howell's way, how confident, and it was something that I was curious about asking you guys tonight, how confident are you that you think this might be a pass first team this coming season? Like, I think the pass attempts this past week in our preseason game heavily outweighed our running attempts. Do you think that that is going to be something that transpires into the season? Do you think that Eric Bieniemy is going to be confident enough to make this become a pass first offense with Sam Howell in charge?
I do. We had 17 different players. Now, granted, it's a preseason game, right? So we're rotating guys in that probably would never be on the field in a normal game, but 17 different players caught a pass, at least one pass. And there were a lot more passes than 17 thrown. And every running back was targeted. Every single running back on our roster was targeted. They didn't all catch the balls thrown their way, but every one of them was in the passing offense. So I mean, I think we'll run a good deal, but I don't think Eric Bieniemy was brought here to be a pounded out Ron Rivera, we're a rushing first team. I don't believe that for 1 second. Does anyone else believe that? What Ron said, in the offseason about we're gonna be a smash mouth run first offense.
I don't want to talk too much, but my take's a little different. I'd like to think that Eric Bieniemy is the kind of offensive coordinator who will call whatever the hell is working on a particular week against a particular defense and where he thinks the weaknesses are. I think in the first half we ran 39 plays, 30 of them were passes. I think that's because he wanted to work on stuff. I'd like to think that, like Bill Belichick will do, if it means running 24 straight passes to start a game, that's what he'll do. If he's going to pound the rock 1 week, that's what he'll do. I hope.
Well, and you took the words right out of my mouth, Mark. I think Ron Rivera might have had every intention for that to be true, but I think Eric Bieniemy is going to walk in here and say, "This, we're going to play with the plays that I call, and this is my offense, and this is how it's going to work." And I think Rivera's okay with that. Not in an asshole-ish, like, egotistical way, but more in a way of, look, man, like, if it's working, it's working, and we're going to do it. And my job is to be here. I don't think anybody here has any qualms or any notion or belief other than the fact that Eric Bieniemy is here to do one thing, and that's get a head coaching job. So that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be here, but I mean in general. And how's he going to do that? Is he's going to have a successful offense. So,
and an adaptable one, right? You can't.
Right. I don't see him. I think he's going to do whatever it takes to have a successful offense and do his part on that side of the ball. And if it's running, it's running. And if it's not,
I would love to bookmark this conversation and revisit it at the end of the season. I don't think your guys are wrong at all. And I agree, I agree with what Mark said, but I just think even with the running backs, they're going to look for guys that can catch the ball. And he knows what I think he realizes what he's got in Howell potentially. And that's not gonna, I just don't see it equating to like a run heavy offense.
Have you guys noticed how little that Antonio Gibson has been targeted in this preseason. Until that touchdown, I don't think he had one catch except for a screen. And I don't think that's an accident. I made a comment. I was texting with my uncle during the game, and I made a comment to him about how I don't think it's an accident that we've seen Brian Robinson get the overwhelming majority of the targets, because I think he is going to, that's by design, because Gibson is going to be a threat in the pass game, and he doesn't want to play that card yet.
I hear that. I keep thinking that we're going to see sets and combinations that we really haven't seen before. He's got a couple of guys. Gibson is one, and Samuel's another. You can deploy all over the
Anywhere.
field. You can have
Yeah,
them
they
in the backfield. You can have them out wide. You can have them in motion. I don't think we're going to see Gibson pounding it too often. I think you're going to see Rodriguez on that, and maybe Gore, who I'm becoming a fan of. So yeah,
And how deep is our freaking RB room? Sorry, Mark, but
Yeah.
I know it
mentioned
is.
Gore.
It is deep.
Jonathan Williams, Gore, both those guys look great.
I'm not sure we can keep both of them. I'd be real curious to see how that plays out. He can't hide Gore now. He's shown his hand a little bit with Gore, so you can't expect him to clear waivers.
Yeah, and I know Rodriguez had the fumble, but that was kind of a fluky play because he actually had really good control of the ball. I think once he stiff armed a guy, but he brought the other arm right back in. It was just the play got held up enough so someone snuck in behind him that he wasn't aware of it, which can happen to anybody. So I don't really think that was a big deal, that particular fumble. Not that you want to see
unless it happens again Saturday, right? Just remember Gibson when he went through that in his rookie year? Was it his rookie year when we had pretty much, or am I thinking of somebody else? Where we pretty much decided,
No,
it was Gibby. He was basically written off.
Yeah, and look, and now nobody even thinks twice about it. So it's about what Rodriguez does now. Does he learn from that? Make adjustments and just be extra careful with the rock, at least for the next few games.
So I guess that's a good segue into our next conversation. You mentioned the running back room. I'd like to go through a couple position groups that I think we have some major competition at. And we can start with running backs. I think Gibson is a lock. Robinson, lock. Beyond that, maybe Rodriguez because of the draft capital. But then you've got Patterson, Williams, and Gore all fighting for what might be a fourth roster spot.
Yep.
Right?
Mhm.
I can't see us carrying 5 running backs, because there's even a chance, if you really want to get down to it, there's even a chance that fourth running back spot might go to Alex Arma, who would be the first fullback we've had since Darryl Young. So
I think Patterson's dead man walking right out of the gate out of those names. And I know I beat on Patterson a lot because I just don't think he's got the size to be up. He runs like a power back, but he's a tiny guy. And I know he did have a great play. He had a couple great plays last Monday, but he just doesn't. I just don't think he just can't do it at this level consistently. And I think wasn't he on the practice squad last year at one point?
mm-hmm.
So I think it's probably
he played in the Dallas game. He was on the practice squad most of the year, I believe, and then he played against Dallas, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think Patterson's problem is that he doesn't do anything so amazingly well that he stands out from the pack. He was great in the passing game at the moment. The problem is all of our backs now can apparently catch the football. Brian Robinson is showing that he's the complete back, right? Yeah. I mean, he's proving he's a complete back. Gibson was a wide receiver. I don't know what Rodriguez has done as far as catching the ball, but, it doesn't look to me like Patterson is doing anything in particular that would make him want to, or make the team want to keep him for that skill. I could see him back on the practice squad again, so they can keep him around.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking at it, Bob. I think if we're talking about 6 names here, assuming that we keep 4, the 2 that we can't keep on the active roster, I'd like to think I'd have the option to hide them on the practice squad. And the only 2 guys I can see I don't see anybody other than Patterson and maybe Gore is a new kid, so I don't know, but I think Williams would probably survive waivers, and I think Patterson would. I think someone would snap up Gore. Rodriguez is not going anywhere. So
Well, it's
that
going to be
comes
Gore or
down to,
Williams at the fourth spot. One of those guys.
yeah.
I don't know which one though.
I guess probably depends on who can help you more. A, who can help you more on teams, and B, who you think you can stash if you're interested in keeping them around.
I thought wide receiver got a lot murkier, not clearer on Monday night because Tinsley didn't play well. I don't know. We didn't have any really standout performances by the bubble guys in the wide receiver room.
McGowan got more looks than I expected.
They were trying to give Tinsley a chance to earn a job.
Yeah.
And it slipped through his hands. I think during that last drive, and we can dig a little bit into the game because it does matter to the conversation, but during that final drive, I want to say 3 different receivers had balls that they had hands on that were very catchable balls that the defender made a good play. Don't get me wrong, but that you want your NFL receiver to be able to come down with. And all 3 of them lost possession. I think Tinsley had 2 of them, if I'm remembering correctly.
And these are your chances to maybe make an impression and make a club, right? It's the biggest opportunity of these guys' lives so far.
So I guess to evolve the conversation to wide receiver, let's say hypothetically we carry 3 running backs and a fullback or 4 running backs, then you're going to have a hard time keeping more than 5 receivers, maybe 6. I think 6 might be even a little bit of a stretch depending on your defense. Who are your 6?
Well, we know the top 4 are, and in all honesty,
McLaurin, Dotson.
Yeah,
McLaurin, Dotson, Samuel, and De'Ami Brown are pretty much locks. But behind that,
and honestly, I think De'Ami Brown may actually even have helped himself Monday night.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he came really close to having that first touchdown in the end zone that went away. The second one was just a great route.
And that chemistry he's got with Hal, there's something.
And they just about had, if Hal put another yard under that deep ball, it would have been in De'Ami's hands, and the defender wouldn't have been able to make a play on it. So, I mean, that wasn't De'Ami's problem at all. That was all on the quarterback.
I thought he made a hell of a play on the one he didn't score on later in the game. He caught like a little something over the middle, 10, 12 yards, and beat a couple of guys and looked quick and aggressive running the ball, which I have not seen from him yet. He definitely flashed in this game, and thank God, right? It's about time.
But you go back, and the name I keep coming back to on the list, we've got the top 4. The name I keep coming back to is Kaz Allen. He didn't hurt himself on teams again, right?
I think he's a lock. I really do.
And they're using them on punts and kickoffs. So he had a 20-yard punt return, 23-yard kick return.
Right.
I'll be shocked if he's not on the active roster.
That was the debate between him and Milne, was which guy are you going to keep? And the way that we saw Kaz Allen getting on this team was going to be in the return game.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it is definitely intriguing. I'll be interested Saturday to see, because he could lock himself in with a big return or some consistency there. Sorry, John.
I think Pringle is. I just have a feeling he'll be on the active roster.
See, my bet was Kemp. Sorry, not Shaw, Kemp. But now that Pringle's been there, I think Pringle takes Kemp's spot, to be honest with you.
For a couple of reasons, right? He veteran, knows the system, knows Eric Bieniemy and all that. You got to have that guy in your wide receiver room.
Well, and I think he's explosive. I think Bieniemy looks at our tight end room, a guy like Cole Turner, and says, "Why do I need a 6'5" wide receiver when I've got one in tight end that I can just split out, and save the roster spot?"
And Turner did a pretty good job Monday night.
Yeah, he's settled in, right? He's kind of eased our concerns. We spent a lot of time talking about tight end last weekend and the weekend before about whether or not we had a representative NFL tight end room without Logan Thomas. And I don't think there's a whole lot of angst about that right now.
No. And he only caught 2 balls. That's a crazy part of it. But the balls he caught you're like, wow, look, that was.
Well, I think also he, if I'm not mistaken, I remember the commentators even mentioning he looked he looked very different as a lead blocker in this game. They utilized him as in the run game as a blocker, and he looked perfectly capable. Unlike before, where that was one of the concerns was, okay, he can catch the ball, he can run routes, but can he be a 3-down tight end, or is he a tell on your offense where if anytime he comes in the game, it's a pass?
So I know we're going to talk about defense, and I want to talk about special teams a little bit too. But Paul, what did you make of our second and third string quarterback on Monday night?
Well, obviously, Brissett was beyond awful in my opinion. I heard you guys talk about him on a previous podcast, and to be quite honest with you guys, I haven't even seen the Browns game yet because we were away that week. I didn't have access to the game, and
It
I know
looked a
you
lot
guys,
better than in Monday night.
that's what I was going to say. You guys were saying that he played well, and in looking at the stats and whatnot, and seeing some brief highlights, it seemed like he did half decent, and I was expecting a lot more out of him. There was absolutely zero accuracy. I believe one of his throws ended up putting De'Ami Brown in
In
like
the
they tested
concussion
him for
protocol.
concussion or whatnot, and
Yeah.
that was because the throw was way behind him. So I mean, something was off with him last week, but at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily read too much into that and be too concerned. He seems like he's a pretty decent pro. He's got some experience, and I expect him to be able to bounce back next week and to be a steadying presence for us moving forward. I kind of actually liked seeing some of the work that Jake Fromm put together in fourth quarter there. I mean, Baltimore was out to get him. They were
He prefers
blitzing
to
him
be called Jake from State Farm, just so you know.
Jake Fromm, State Farm.
Yeah.
That's apparently his nickname.
Yeah, the Ravens were throwing a ton of blitzes at him at the end there, and credit to him for standing in there and making some decent throws. And I thought he was pretty resilient as well, because Derek alluded to it. He had some pretty nice balls that were hitting guys in the hands or coming relatively close to being balls that should have been caught. And, I figured that's it. Like, guys are dropping balls left and right. I'm like, they're not going to have a game-winning drive at this point. And he was pretty resilient. He stayed with it, stuck with it, and got us into field goal range. So I actually kind of liked what I saw from him. Who knows? Is he going to be our emergency quarterback at this point? I think it's a pretty safe bet to say so.
Yeah. And that doesn't bother me. So interesting thing. Anybody know where Jake Fromm was drafted?
Fifth round.
Fifth round.
By the Giants, I think. Maybe.
Close, Buffalo.
And then he went to the Giants after that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
First season.
That I don't see. I was just looking at where he was drafted. Yeah, he was drafted 167. Mr. Howell was drafted 144.
Yeah, Jake did a nice job. I know I don't want to get too sidetracked because we still have to talk about the offensive line. We really need to talk about that. But on that final series, there's people wonder why the Ravens won 24 straight preseason games. All you got to do is look at the way they dialed up defense on that last drive. If that's Del Rio on the other side, we're rushing three and everybody's dropping back. Del Rio or Baltimore called 3 straight zero blitzes on those. They just had everybody coming. It's a whole different mindset in preseason. Our team had not prepped for any of that. I guarantee you. What I really liked, I don't know if EB called them or if Fromm did this on his own, but the answer to those zero blitz on like 2 or 3 straight, he didn't just dump it. He went for the kill shot on all 3 of them. So I loved that aggression. I thought that was brilliant.
Absolutely.
Well, the one thing you got to love about Fromm is being a 3-year starter coming in. He came in because of an injury at Georgia, but he was a 3-year starter at Georgia and they won their conference. He's not a scrub. I mean, he doesn't have the arm strength and he doesn't have the mobility that Brissett has, but he's not a scrub. I mean, the guy knows how to manage a game. So I thought he was really impressive.
Best third string quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
The other intriguing thing is you were talking about those chances. In reality, how many of those, if we have our top 2 receivers in the game, how many of those hit? And then it makes you wonder, you know what I mean? The outcome of that game could have been a lot, even more
lopsided.
Or even well different and a lot less nerve wracking because how much of those catches you have to imagine Dotson or McLaurin brings down at a minimum one of them, and then you're in a chippy, and you're looking at a touchdown at that point. So it was a fun drive. I can tell you, I've never been so freaking anxious about a preseason game in my entire life. So
Yeah, that was awesome, man. It was a lot of fun.
it was a lot of fun to watch.
So let's talk offensive line, man.
My going into the game, I wanted to see two things from the OL. I wanted to see the pass rush that was just a kind of overwhelming in the Cleveland game. We just could never seem to get a good set. I thought the pass blocking in this game, I know it was not against ones and all that, but the pass blocking was exceptional in this game. All the quarterbacks had time to stand and make reads. So I was thrilled with that. I also wanted to see some lanes for the running game, and I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's scheme or if it's what, but heading into the regular season, I'm wondering what our run block situation is going to look like early on. Because right now it doesn't look so hot to me. Anybody see something different?
No, I agree with you. It's like the pocket. There were numerous times in that game. Again, it's preseason, but where you could have taken out a felt tip pen and drawn the pocket out. I mean, you could just see it, and it held. So, and again, it helps when your quarterback's, with two exceptions, isn't holding on to the ball. But I thought they did a surprisingly good job. And I'm with you, man. We averaged 5 yards a carry on the ground, so I think we've got good enough running back talent that they don't have to have a huge hole. But I wasn't impressed at all with the run blocking.
I'm still kind of waiting to see that first big open run lane through the line. I haven't seen it yet through the first two games. The yards that our guys are getting, they're getting on effort and running through people and in tight windows. I just don't know if that's something that they've really been focused on as much as getting the pass game coordinated, which I'm fine with. But that is one area of concern for me going into the season is, are we going to be able to run the ball with any kind of consistency?
I think some of this goes back to the question that we kind of posed almost at the top of this, and that was, do any of us believe this is going to be a run-first offense? And the more Sam Howell plays and the more I hear Eric Bieniemy talk, the less I think this is going to be a run-first offense. It doesn't mean we aren't going to put the rushing numbers up, but this is an offense I'm beginning to wonder if we aren't going to see Eric go, air it out the first 2.5, 3 quarters. And then Q4 is going to be a healthy dose of Robinson and Gibson to close things out. And the guys start making their yards late in games. Yeah, the running backs are making more yards catching the ball in the first 2 quarters than they are running the ball. And then the fourth quarter, they get all their rushing yards.
With the intention of having a 10 or a double-digit lead going into the the second half of the third quarter, and at that point, it's let's just grind them into submission.
With the talent that we've got on the outside, the talent playing in the open field, I was watching guys running free the other night. The play that stood out to me, because of what Howell did, when he got away from pressure and he rolled to the outside all on his own. But part of what made that play was Jahan Dotson looking over his shoulder and went, oh, wait, my quarterback's in trouble. He broke the route off and he came back. He gave, and he was, oh my gosh, there was nobody within a zip code of him because he broke it off right out into space and gave Howell a big target. And then he did something with the football. Granted, he didn't score, but, it was just, I was watching all of that and I thought, again, that same thought we had last week, Mark, that this kid doesn't play like a second-year wide receiver. And I just see all this talent, and I have to imagine that Eric Bieniemy lays in bed at night and stares at the ceiling, and he's just too excited to sleep because he's ready for opening day. He wants to unleash this thing on the NFL. He's got to be excited about this.
I think one thing that's going to be different this season than we've seen in a long time is because we might have a quarterback who can, like, isn't going to fold under the pressure like Wentz did over and over last year. When it's crunch time where we're in 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 6, we're not going to see running plays called like we have seen in the past, where we're all like saying, why are we rushing on 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6? We had 20 first downs through the air in that last game on Monday night. 20. I mean, that's more first downs than we sometimes have had in games. And again, it's preseason, I know, but I think they're going to put a lot on Sam Howell. I really do.
So I don't know if we're ready to transition to it, but we're going to have to score more if the defense doesn't play a little better than they did on Monday night.
Well, real quick, I do want to touch. You mentioned the run game, and I would like to say, did you guys notice how much more time we had in this game blocking? And we were without starters as far as pass protection.
Yeah, the pass pro was solid the whole night.
So after last week's game, we were talking about what kind of a mitigated disaster this line could be. They were substantially better, and I saw some like multiple plays. There was one play, and it might have even been the sack last year. There was or last week, sorry, that there were 3 linemen with nothing to do because they had pancaked all 4 of the pass rushers. Just so happens one of them got back up and chased Sam Howell down. But this week I saw a lot of the same. And there was a couple plays. Sadiq Charles did one where he was bear crawling just to keep himself between the defensive tackle and Howell. And Howell ended up escaping the pocket, and he stepped forward and ended up going right. And that it was impressive. Like, there were plays where Sam Howell was getting to his 4th and 5th read. Now, I'm not saying that we can just go into games expecting that, because we were playing 2nd and 3rd stringers and all the caveats, but there was a noticeable difference in how much better this pass protection was this week versus last week. So I'm just curious if you guys noticed it.
Yeah, I did that. That's what I was saying, Derek. I thought that was the biggest improvement we made from week 1 to 2 was the pass protection. And that's against, I know it wasn't starters, but it was against the defense that came from every angle. They weren't just rushing their 4 downs like we did all game. They were bringing people from everywhere, and we still picked up most of it. It's pretty impressive for a preseason game.
And
that might have been the result of Eric Bieniemy crawling up a bunch of players
Yeah.
week.
And did you see Jonathan Williams power bomb?
He was being mean again.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see Jonathan Williams power bomb that defensive end coming in on the blitz?
Oh my gosh, that was brilliant. He completely stonewalled the guy and then dumped him on his butt and then started looking around for somebody else to hit.
So, all right. I mean, Paul, did you see it? What are you feeling about our O-line? Are you more comfortable now than you were coming in? Because you said you haven't watched the Cleveland game.
No, didn't see the Cleveland game, but things seem to be relatively contained and controlled and under control for the most part. One of the things that I'm curious about with our offensive line, I know we haven't seen a lot of Charles Leno at left tackle, and he's been out, hasn't played very much. Last year was a difficult year for him. He certainly took a step back. I think it could be justified and argued that he took a step back last year. And I'd have to go and watch the game again and pay a little bit more particular close attention. But I read a couple things and saw a few things online that were throwing some praise on Cornelius Lucas. And he's been a guy who, as we all know, has had a decent amount of starting experience at tackle. I'm curious to know, and one thing that I might want to pay attention to this year is to see if at any point he would potentially give Leno a little bit of a push. I know Leno's a little bit of a fan favorite and whatnot, but again, he had a down year, and I don't want the guy to have a down year again. He's been a pretty serviceable player for us, and you'd like to see him have a little bit of a rebound this year. But I think we can be in some pretty decent shape potentially if we have to fall back on Lucas. I don't know what you guys are thinking in regards to that.
I've heard nothing but good things about Lucas.
Yeah, my honest answer, Paul, is I would love, really legitimately love to have a chance to look at coach's film and really watch these guys perform on the field. I haven't even looked at the all 22s on NFL Game Pass yet, which I do during the regular season. I'm not even sure they're putting that up yet. So other than what I'm hearing by reference through the media and all that, I couldn't speak knowledgeably to it. Brother, if one of those two guys can play legitimate starting left tackle, that's who I want out there. I don't care which one. I really don't.
Yeah.
I did notice one player that I noticed in the second half that made some plays Monday night, which I was excited about, was Stromberg. I saw him lay a couple players out. Braden Daniels, have you guys noticed him at all in the last two games? Because I haven't really.
I've heard his name called.
I'm guessing he's out there, but I just haven't really noticed him because that's our third and our fourth round pick. So you're thinking we should be seeing some contributions. But I thought Stromberg looked solid in the second half.
Somebody on the radio today, I think Hoffman had somebody on whose name I didn't recognize, who was breaking down a little bit of the OL, and the comments I heard him making was talking about watching Wiley and Cosme on the right side. And he was suggesting that they were working together and passing off rushers to each other and being really, really solid, like surprisingly so. He couldn't talk enough about how well those two guys seem to look. You can combine that with the badass at center. Maybe you start to have something together on the right side there.
And I don't know if you guys caught this, or I personally saw it on Twitter today, where I know we're talking about offensive line, but ties into the idea of blocking. You guys were mentioning, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank, but you said somebody's name, potentially Jonathan Williams, and his contributions as a running back in blocking. But Brian Baldinger was he did a piece on Brian Robinson as well about an amazing or a pretty good blitz pickup that he had as well this past week. So I mean, I'm thinking of, when was the last time we've had running backs that have been able to make solid contributions and be pretty solid blockers for us? I think I have to go back to Clinton Portis.
Clinton Portis is pretty damn good at it. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, you guys mentioned Williams. Again, Baldinger was throwing some praise on Brian Robinson. So, I mean, that's positive as well. So you got to take it any way you can get it at this point.
And when it comes to selecting who makes the roster and who's the last guy, those are the kind of things that add up in the coaches room, right? They're adding up all he can block for the run. He can catch the ball. He doesn't miss his assignments. Those cumulative scores are what keep a guy on the roster.
So we did not have starting defensive linemen, any of them. Did not have our starting defensive backs, any of them, on the field in this game, I don't believe. But it still scares me that we Forbes, I guess, for a few plays.
Forbes is the only starter, I think, who started on the secondary.
Yeah.
Anyone else I guess the one thing probably I shift from being worried about the offensive line to worrying about running backs gashing our defense this week. Again, we didn't have a lot of our starters out there, but they were eating us alive. They averaged 6.8 yards an offensive play, the Ravens did, in a loss. It was kind of rough out there on defense.
John suffered through my texting him a couple of times in the first half of that game. And I actually said at some point that it was embarrassing how unprepared this backup defense looked in the first half, at least on a couple of those drives. It just looked like they didn't know what they were doing. They couldn't set an edge. They kept getting beat to the outside on the run. The middle of the field, they kept losing big fat white guys over the middle. Kept catching the ball on us anytime they needed it.
Even Forbes looked hesitant and unsure early on.
Yeah, they just didn't look ready to play. And that to me was a coaching thing. I know they're backups, but the Ravens played backups too, and they looked like they knew where they were supposed to be and what their jobs were. for parts of that game, I thought the defense just looked completely unprepared, and it surprised me. And that's my real going into next week. I'd like to see some organization from the D and maybe stop the run once or twice. We've just been getting killed on that. I know it's preseason. I get it. And they're not the starters, but I don't know if you just flip that switch. I don't know if it works that way.
But to your point, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
No, go ahead.
To your point, beyond just that, I think like there were some efforts by Quan Martin, a guy, second round pick, that they just left you sitting there like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
One of them was on a swing pass and he had a bad angle to start with, and then the attempt at a tackle was just completely just nonchalant.
Yeah, he just overran it and reached an arm out, right?
Yeah, and just kind of, oh well, I missed it, and you wonder if now, like, I don't know, I'm not trying to ring the bell of potential fear here, but you wonder if the intensity of the offense has surpassed the intensity of the defense, and I hope Jack Del Rio tightens this thing up, especially with the starters, because I'm a little nervous, actually, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
Everybody's
yeah.
talking about the defense is good, but there's been a lot left to be desired on the football field across all levels of the defense. I mean,
and we've seen that before, right? We've seen, like, what was it, last season? I think it was last season where they were
Last year, brother.
setting the all-time sack record. And then for the first 5 games, we looked like we'd never played defense, ever.
And this is year 4 for Mr. Del Rio. The guys, the system ought to be in place, and guys ought to understand what their jobs are, where they're supposed to be on the field. And I think if you're not noticing that and being a little concerned, I don't know if you're really paying attention to what's going on out there, because they don't look very well organized.
And the investment has been there. You've now invested 2 more,
Yep.
high draft picks, a first round pick and a second round pick in the defense.
I mean, it to be fair, we aren't just talking about not having the ones. We didn't have the first guy off the bench out there either. Fedarian Mathis sat the game out too. So there's more than likely your top 5 guys on the depth chart if we take position out of it, right? But having said that, a lot of the guys that were in there have more than a year in this system. Smith Williams is in his 3rd year now.
And legitimate regular season snaps.
Right. Yeah. It's not like all he gets is or a few lousy preseason minutes. The dude's getting 15 to 20 snaps a game, especially with Chase Young out last year. He got quite a bit of time. Tuhill has been here for at least a year, maybe longer at this point. Ridgeway has better than half a season in the system, because we picked him up week 6 or week 7 last year. I don't know. I looked at that, and which made me wonder if Del Rio is almost intentionally calling a vanilla game. Maybe it was just the calls.
I don't know, unless one of his calls is don't rush and don't cover anybody.
Yeah, I know. That you're not wrong, Mark. Maybe I'm trying to make excuses.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hear you, brother. It's just, this is 2 weeks in a row where I keep waiting to see. Now they had their moments. Let's face it. They made some plays. They got some stops late. They got a couple of stops late with like the 5th string or whoever was out there.
They had 2 picks, which,
Well, okay. So you want to break down those picks real quick? Quan Martin was beat so bad on that play, and that interception sort of fell into his hands because the ball was late. So it fell in his hands, and I'm glad that it stuck, because otherwise we'd be talking real bad about him tonight. And the other one was a Hail Mary at the end of the game. But I'm sorry, I'm hard on the defense right now. I'm really just
well, to your point, Mark. The reason it was late,
held them to 100.
The pass rush was there. The pass rush was there, and that's so.
Okay, I mean, fair enough.
They gashed us on the ground. They gashed us on the ground. We held them to 185 net passing yards for the game.
Yeah,
so it wasn't all bad. It was bad on the ground, especially, but
they sat both Lamar Jackson and
they did. But
Huntley. I mean,
in the second half.
They played their QB 3 and 4 all night. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, it's not even like we were playing, we were playing against the emergency guys.
I'm
With
not
our,
writing.
we just said
Paul.
we said almost our entire starting defense. It's
Right.
all. I mean, it's all part of the same.
I know,
thing.
but say it was 2s and 3s against 2s and 3s, and their 2s were kicking 2s ass.
Paul, you were getting
all
ready
I'm
to make a
saying
point.
is that our defense, I have concerns, and that the defense has not looked like it's in sync yet. And there's guys missing assignments, and there are holes. I know it's preseason, and I'm fully expect them to be competitive out of the gate against Arizona, but I'd like to see a sign or two of that this weekend, so that you don't have to listen to me talk about it again next Wednesday.
So let's spend 3 minutes on special teams, because I think special teams is going to be the most improved unit we have.
Hold on, Paul. You were trying to make a point, and I talked over you. What were you gonna say, buddy?
No, Derek, you were no worries whatsoever. You were alluding to it anyways, because Mark was talking about the whole, it seemed like the defense didn't seem prepared thing. And the only other thing I was going to add over and above that, and you had already alluded to it, Derek, but on top of that, the next layer, which would be very concerning to me, is there was a lack of fundamentals. You saw guys going in with arm tackles. Like, you take tackling as a fundamental piece of football that every player should know how to do and do properly. And it just seemed like on a few occasions that was missing as well. So, I mean, that raises a bit of a red flag, but
Word.
yeah.
Agreed.
Oh, and we still can't cover tight ends either. Was that one player, I forget what his name was.
He's like-
Love or something. Yeah.
He's a
Yeah,
rookie, right?
Yeah,
They
he
kept
gashed us for
splitting-
2 touchdowns.
I know we were
Cusco?
playing
Was it
vanilla.
Cusco? Or is that the guy from Emperor's New Groove?
I don't know, but he wasn't exactly svelte. I mean, we're talking about a roly-poly tight end.
Oh, that's the other dude. Yeah, that's like that was kind of embarrassing. But so I'm not an X's and O's guys, as I think you all know, but it seems to me that in playing the kind of soft, too deep, vanilla type defense we were playing, we never did seal up the middle. They just kept finding it between the hashes, and we just never made any kind of adjustments. Maybe Del Rio, like Bob is suggesting, he's like, hey, let them sink or swim.
All right, John, you wanted to talk about special teams?
Well, obviously Joey Sly hit the kicks he had to kick. But I thought, and we already talked about Casimir Allen. I just wanted to mention, well, first of all, our kickoff and punt return coverage has been really good.
Yep.
This whole preseason, which is a big deal because we used to struggle a lot with that. And then I also wanted to mention Pilardi, who we were bashing. At least I was bashing last time because I didn't feel like he was really competition. Well, I guess I was bashing the field goal kicker who we cut him, but Pilardi got signed to be, at least for the moment, to be, Tress Wade's backup. That guy looked great. I mean, he did a great job. He had 2 50-yarders. And anyway, I just think the special teams is slowly become a strength over the last couple seasons, which could be a big deal for us.
But one thing I want to point out, I've been tooting the horn about this draft pick. It's one of the few draft picks I've been tooting the horn about. Cam Cheeseman, he's skipping snaps, man.
That's the first one, right? That's the first time we've heard his name, isn't it?
Yes, and that if it wasn't for Tressway being the holder, that ball doesn't go through. So
yeah, that was bad.
That's a little concerning, and apparently he's readjusted his snapping motion because he wants a higher velocity or spin rate or something.
You had one job, Cheeseman.
I'm telling you, just get the damn ball to the holder.
Well, if it's one bad snap in 3 years, then I'm all right with that. So
if it's the only one, yes.
Right?
But if it's the beginning of a trend, then we have a problem.
So, quick snap test, and I didn't know the answer, so I had to look it up. Who's the special teams coach on the Washington Commanders?
I guess
Nate
it's not
Kazor?
Not Nate Kazor.
Boom! Give that man a cigar. Yeah, Nate Kazor.
Leave it up to Paul to have the obscure
coaching
position group coaching.
Remember when that was a big deal, right? When we had Pete Rodriguez back in the day, and
Danny Smith.
Danny Smith, yeah, screaming and yelling. I don't know that he was a great special teams coach, but he screamed and yelled like top notch.
He was
reviewed as one of the best in the
as
league.
big as my fist.
Tress Way continues to prove that he is the MVP of this team, even when he's not punting the football.
Yeah.
That job that he did on controlling that snap was out of this world. And it was who was it?
Great cock and bull too.
Pardon me?
Great cock and bull. Tress
Yeah.
Way. The reporters love him.
Well, it was either Joe Buck said it was a thing of beauty when it happened. Now, I don't know if you guys have watched that play. I watched the game live and I've run the condensed version twice, and I watched that play, and it's this, clearly this is the bourbon talking, but when you watch it on replay, the ball comes back to Tress, it hits his hands, and it's almost as if a couple of frames skip because it hits his hands and then it's upright. It's like just instant. Go back and watch it and you'll see if you don't notice it. It didn't look natural. So whatever he did, here's to Mr. Way.
He found a way.
Found the way. And the streak is dead. I'm so glad we don't have to talk about that anymore.
And we're undefeated in the Josh Harris era. So I mean, it's a win-win.
Josh
Just
had
to clarify, I just want to say one thing on Sam Cosme's behalf. Yes, Sam Cosme did say this is a stupid fucking record, but
right.
he didn't say we're not going to kick their ass.
Right.
To win the game. In fact, he said we're going to end the stupid record. So
and
anyway,
he had a nice little dance going during that melee in the end zone.
Yeah, how about that? Was it Gates that came through and leveled some dude, and then Sam's doing the gritty?
Look, man, I'm sorry, but I miss that level of nasty with our team.
Yep.
Like, you got to have a couple guys, a couple dogs on your team that are just willing to just plant somebody and just step over them and let them realize who did it to them. Show them the license plate of the truck that just ran them over. Like, we've needed this for we need that kind of attitude. And if Gates is that guy, then Gates is that guy.
The little Danny Johnson payback right there is what that was.
And look, we had our issues with Ridgeway last year, and I was just frustrated in the moment. But when he body slammed that running back, there was a little bit of, when we talked about it on the podcast, there was a little bit of each one of us that was like, hell yeah, brother. That just mean streak.
Wild Goose is another guy that had a bad game, man, then might have hurt.
Who?
John, I was just thinking about that. I've been talking bad about him since the end of last year. I don't know why he's on this roster. I apologize, Mr. Wild Goose. Enter your family. I don't know you, but he was.
I think he played himself off the team.
I could never figure out why he was on the team. The only time you ever see his number is running after somebody or tapping them after they're already down after completing a ball. He was brutal in this game.
I think he played himself out of a job.
I want to say I remember a couple of nice special teams plays last year, Mark, but
okay, I'm good with that.
But I think he's a like Apke, right? If you're a liability when we have to use you in the regular base defense, I'm not sure we can afford to have you here for special teams. I mean,
he does some good stuff in the middle, like but on the outside, oh my God, it's ugly.
I had a couple of notes on guys that I just noticed things in plays. Now, you guys probably have this too. I wanted to mention last week I was talking about our 7'8" tight end, Curtis Hodges, or whatever the hell he is. He had to
catch the ball, man.
He had one opportunity in this game on that lob from Fromm at the end, and it just maybe he was wrong-footed or something.
He had two.
But it just looked like he was stuck in the mud. And a guy 6'8", I expect him to be able to elevate by more than 3 or 4 inches and make that catch. So I was disappointed in that.
Maybe that was a play from Fromm.
I mean, Fromm was trying everything he could.
Yeah, he was.
In that game.
Was that when he broke the pocket and rolled right? And Hodges was just in a soft spot in the defense.
Yeah. And if he catches it, he's got a chance. He gets a 20-yard gain. He gets out of bounds, and it's a chip field goal. So that was disappointed in that. And the other one I was disappointed in was the poor defensive tackle that apparently they signed off the street a few days before the game, who jumped off sides on the 4th down in the red zone. He got suckered off sides. I bet you he was on the next bus back out of town. Poor puss. Poor some bitch, man. You see him looking up at the sky like, oh, what did I do?
You know, we talked about the numbers significantly on the offensive side of the ball. We really haven't done that on the defensive side of the ball. You say Wild Goose played himself off the team the other night, Derek. I'm not sure. I'll be honest with you and tell you that in my mind, I cut Wild Goose on draft day.
Yeah.
You know, I
yeah,
cut
that's
him on
yeah,
draft day.
you're probably right. Chances are he wasn't on the team anyways, but
Right.
At a minimum, he has eliminated his ability to have a roster spot.
You know,
in my
you
opinion.
stop and look at the guys that have a roster spot at this point, right? Fuller, St. Just, Forbes, obviously, Quan Martin, obviously.
Quan Martin's technically a safety, right?
Well, he's gonna
KJ Henry. KJ Henry's making some noise.
He's
out
gonna
there.
play some. He's probably gonna play some slot corner for us too.
Andre Jones
Martin.
and KJ Henry have both done some.
Yeah, but
good
I think Bob's focused on defensive backs right now.
Yeah, Danny Johnson.
Yeah,
and there's another name out there that's escaping.
Christian Holmes isn't going anywhere.
Christian Holmes. Holmes has been playing is balling out in camp.
I mean, I think we actually have, without even thinking about Wild Goose, I think they're going to have to make a couple of very tough decisions in the quarterback room and maybe in the safety room.
In the safety room, you might be so stacked at safety that you sacrifice corner. You only run 5 corners.
Yeah, because Martin plays both places.
Right. And then you've got Curl and you've got Forrest, Martin, and
Reeves.
And Reeves. And then you might even carry a 5th safety who can play corner. And then you reduce your cornerback room by 1.
Yeah. I mean, Wild Goose played a lot last night. I think they're giving him the opportunity to try and play his way into somebody's plans, and he's just not taking the chance, is really what's happening.
Right.
Right. And isn't that the traditional thought that late in preseason, the more guys playing, the more clear it is he's not going to be on that roster, and they're giving a chance for the rest of the league to look at him. So I think you'll be looking at a lot of our cuts playing on Saturday.
Yeah.
Won't be hard to cut down the linebacker room, right? Because we've only got 2 linebackers on the roster.
Yeah, really. So we'll skip over that. But before we sign off, I am Terry McLaurin, turf toe, X-rays are negative, MRI shows no substantial damage. Real quick, on a level 1 to 10, how worried are you guys?
About Terry?
Yeah.
I'm marginally worried that he won't be 100% on week 1. I suspect he won't see the field unless he is until week 2 or 3. I'm preparing myself that he's not there for opening day, but probably there for week 2 or 3.
I'm not worried. I think he'll be there on opening day, and you will not be able to tell a thing is wrong with him.
From your lips, brother.
Paul?
I'm hoping we go the cautious route, kind of like what Mark was alluding to. I don't think there's necessarily any urgency to throw him out there in the first week of the season. Because let's face it, if you push this type of injury a little bit too much, there's the potential it can be something that really, really lingers and bothers him long-term throughout the season. And I don't think we can really afford that. So get him right. Do what you need to do at the beginning of the season to let him heal properly. So that we can have him at 100% effectiveness moving forward. So am I a little bit concerned? Yes, I am. In the event that they don't handle it with caution.
You asked for a number between 1 and 10, and I'm going to tell you I'm in that 2-3 range at the moment, Derek. I'm not terribly worried about it. Terry is one of the most professional guys on the team. And while I know he wants to play, I have to believe that he is cognizant of the history of this kind of injury in wide receivers and what can happen if you don't take care of it. I also have to believe, hopefully, that our medical staff has that same level of understanding. I wouldn't be surprised if he's standing on the sideline in street clothes week 1. Unless he is 100%. And I mean, if he's at 97%, I think he's standing on the sideline on street clothes week 1. because it's Carolina or not Carolina, because it's the Cardinals.
Arizona. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's the Cardinals, and I think we see him week 2.
I bet he's practicing next week.
Yeah,
I
side
wouldn't be-
field. Side field.
You know,
Yeah.
he may very well be practicing next week, but I feel like we could go out there with Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, De'Ami Brown, and do a real
still-
number on the Cardinals right now.
Yeah, I'm not worried about. We have so much talent in the wide receiver room. Even if he was out for 5 or 6 weeks, I would not be freaking out because I just think we have so many targets. I mean, it would be a loss, but I think we.
How crazy is that to think about? Because when he was in his second season, and even as a rookie, it was a situation where if it's like you lose
He's the
Terry,
only
you lose
guy
your
we have,
offense.
right?
And we
Yeah.
did, right? And the offense ground to a complete halt.
Yeah.
So I have to
I
ask
guess-
you.
Mhm.
Sorry,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Mark.
Derek.
I was gonna say, does this change real quick? Then does this change your ability? Does anybody hold it against this offensive the staff to play him? Me personally, no. I think he should have played. I'm glad he played. He needs to be out there to give Sam the best possible chance to win. But I was just curious.
That's where I was going to, Derek. I agree. I know I wonder how different this conversation would have been if we had lost him for half the season, like to a legit injury. We
Right.
might all feel a little bit differently about it. I was actually also pleased to see that we were willing to break with conventional wisdom and play the starters because we got a young quarterback and a new offense and a new OC. The Jets think they can show up on opening day and throw their quarterback out there for the first time. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. I think we didn't have that luxury. So I have zero problem with how we handled it.
If you've got a 4-time league MVP playing quarterback, you can play games like that, Mark. I think, but
We do not.
No. In fact, not only do, the guy doesn't have 4 games, much less 4 MVP trophies. And he's playing in a brand new offense. And I think that half of football against a team that is traditionally defensively aggressive, even if they weren't playing their starters, the Ravens are an aggressive defense. And I think it was probably the best opportunity to get Howell reps in a harsh environment. I
also a bunch of
wholeheartedly
cheap shot
agree with
artists.
Paul.
That's also a bunch of cheap shot artists. That play, the defender went out of his way to land on McLaurin after that. It wasn't like he just was breaking up a pass and like inadvertent contact. He put his whole body on top of him, and that's how he got hurt.
I might be more frustrated with it if the injury weren't something that routinely happens to guys in the NFL on non-contact plays in practice. I mean, turf toe is one of those things that you can mess up without anybody touching you, and guys do all the time. If Terry'd gotten his leg broken because somebody was out to get him, I might be a little more pissed. But
or concussed like De'Ami could have been. The guy who hit De'Ami didn't need to come in like he did.
Back of his head.
He put a shoulder into the back of the guy's head.
Shoulder,
I'm surprised it wasn't called.
Well, the referees are a whole different discussion, Mark.
Yeah. I know it's preseason for them too, right? So we've got week 3 coming up, gents, and we need to go into it knowing that it's going to be a whole lot of guys who, what the Cornhusker used to say, who are going to be slicing meat next week.
Yeah, it's going to be a big nothing burger.
I want to do an ending quiz. How many positions do you think are really even up for grabs? How many roster spots?
Roster spots or positions? Okay.
How many roster spots are really up for grabs right now? Because I bet it's a lot less than we think.
Probably 3.
That's what I'm thinking, like 2 or 3.
I'd be shocked if it's more than 5.
Yeah,
I think there's a 3-way battle for the 4th running back spot. I think
there
there's
might
probably
be questions at running back, wide receiver,
and defensive back.
Yeah, probably.
And on the OL too. This clearly needs to be a BGO poll, gentlemen, right? Because we kind of do a roster.
I think our O line is set. It just depends on how it shuffles down. I don't think there's going to be I don't think anybody can win a job this weekend in the
No.
offensive line.
No, not this weekend, but before cut downs, I think it would be a lot of fun to come up with your 53. Because I'm
Right.
just doing this based on gut feeling, and I think I'm closer to where Bob is. I'm thinking 5, 7, something like that. But I couldn't put names to them off the top of my head.
John, when you say you think there's questions at wide receiver, are you referring specifically to a wide receiver who would be able to contribute as a returner? Like a special
Well, I don't
just-
know.
type guy?
I don't
I
know.
just-
We
I think there's probably
always have our
one.
we have our camp crushes, and Kazimir Allen's one of them right this
Yeah,
year.
I think
But whether or not they think, I mean, they're not gonna. I personally don't think they're gonna keep Allen just because he's an upgrade at returns. If they don't feel like he's gonna contribute down the road as a wide receiver, they'll put him on the practice squad. But they might. I mean, but I don't know. I'm just looking at like 3 guys that any one of them could be the 6th wide receiver, but I don't know which one it's going to be.
There may be questions at tight end. I think the top 3 are set, right? Thomas, Bates, and Turner. Do we keep 4? I don't know. Maybe we don't. But I think the 5th wide receiver, the 6th wide receiver spot, I think is Allen's, and I think it's Allen's because of special teams. And I think number 5 is the position that's up for grabs there. I think Derek's right. There's 3 guys fighting over, one football for that last running back slot. And then on defense, I got to tell you, I'm just not sure. I'm not sure that's not set.
I think the defensive backs. But then, to your point, I don't know that anybody can play themselves onto the roster this weekend.
No,
So that's 3 spots you just named, Bob. So
Right.
maybe
I'm on
linebacker.
board.
I don't know. Maybe there'll be some fight at linebacker, right? I mean, I'm guessing that what's his face? Davis and Barton are locks.
Hudson is a lock.
I think Hudson's probably a lock. So then you've got Mayo, Effler, and Harris, and those guys are good. It's going to come down to who they want for special teams, is my guess.
Effler
Mayo
didn't
actually
look good on Monday
last-
either. Here's another guy that didn't look great.
So
are we going to do another contest? Name your 53-man roster?
Oh my God.
I'm not keeping track of that.
well, so here's the problem with that contest is your 53-man roster on what day? Because
Well,
on cutdown day, it'll be one
Cutdown day,
53-man
yeah.
roster, but by Thursday, it'll be something different. And by the time we actually open against Arizona, it'll be
It'll be
something
different, yeah.
yet again.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Contest is who's the surprise who gets a surprise roster spot. To me, that's the way to approach it. Who's the one guy that we keep that nobody thought we would keep?
At the very least, that's a poll question. I kind of like that idea.
I think that's this kid Andre Jones Jr. is going to make the team.
Yep.
Nobody saw that one coming.
The 7th rounders. Wasn't he a 7th?
Yeah.
And let me just tell you, if he can make the roster, that would be awesome because we're going to have a lot of questions asked, but spend a lot of money on defensive ends. So if you can find a viable starter, that can give you opportunities that
With his rookie body, the kid is 6'5", he's already 260, and he moves like a linebacker.
and he flashes a lot.
Yeah, he does.
We have a pretty good history. You got to give Rivera and company some credit on that front. We have a pretty good recent history of finding guys late who can play. Curl and I think Derek Forrest. There's
Curl
he does.
Curl was the 7th.
Yeah, but I think Curl was before.
No,
maybe not. No, you're right.
no, this is his 4th year, and it's Rivera's 4th year.
Yeah.
The 7th round alone under Rivera has potentially 4 guys who will be on this roster.
Mhm.
Curl, Smith Williams, I believe Christian Holmes was a
Yep.
7th rounder, and potentially Andre Jones if he makes the roster. I mean, the 7th round is quickly becoming the most interesting round of the NFL draft for us to watch as Washington fans.
They're not throwaways, right? On draft day, we almost treat them as throwaway picks when we traded a 6th, we traded back and picked up 2 7s. Well, then you end up having guys who make your team. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, not just make your team, but I mean, Cam Curl is playing at Pro Bowl, near all pro levels at this point in time. And he's looked better this year in camp than he did at the end of last year. And he looked pretty damn good at the end of last year.
And it's been a stark difference in the defense when he's on the field.
Yes.
Like a noticeable difference.
Yeah. So
when we gather next week on Wednesday, presumably we'll have a chance to talk about who played themselves onto the roster on Saturday night.
Yep, because we will be post cut down day.
And it'll be, we can break down who might have flashed or whatever, but talk about post cut down and start setting the stage for opening day.
That's right.
It's coming, gentlemen. We made it.
Yeah, we did.
So
All right,
I want
boys.
to add one more thing, if I can, before I'm assuming you guys are going to wrap it up. We talked a lot about the players. We talked a lot about, what we saw on the field this past week against Baltimore. And that was, for me, probably one of the most exciting preseason games, probably the most exciting preseason game I've ever experienced as a fan. But over and above all the excitement of the game and ending the Ravens streak and how it ended with a game-winning kick at the end, over and above all that, what I thought was super, super cool, and it just, gave me the warm fuzzies type thing, gave me that warm fuzzy feeling, was seeing Josh Harris going and talking to Aikman and Buck. I thought that was so cool, just having that human element. He kind of seemed like he was one of us. And when you think back to Dan Snyder, I know I apologize for bringing up the guy's name, but he's been so inaccessible for 24 years as owner of the team. And to see Harris do that, to, make himself available, to speak, to those who are watching and whatnot, and those who are listening, I thought that was so cool. And it just gave me a lot of hope moving forward for where this team might be heading.
Amen, brother.
I got to agree with that, Paul. The thing that struck me while he was talking was he didn't look comfortable. He didn't look polished. He looked excited to be there. And the one thing I took away from it was I felt like he's doing this not necessarily because he wants to do it, but he's doing it because he watched what the last guy did. And he is actively trying to be different, to make a difference, to be someone other than that guy. I'm thrilled.
And he's 2 for 2 on game balls in the locker room afterwards. They gave him another one after this game.
Ron is trying so hard.
Ron's sucking up.
Ron is sucking up. So
all right, fair enough.
Joe Gibbs was at a preseason game, man. I thought that was
Yep. And he was in Owings Mills for the practices too. It was good to see. So I don't know that Saturday's even worth doing any predictions, but let's instead of score, you guys want to throw out, maybe as we wrap this up, one name of somebody who makes a flash play or maybe does something exciting.
Brissett's going to look 1,000 times better. I think he might have had his nose out of joint this week or distracted because they named Hal the starter. Not that was a shock, but it might have been a shock to him. Or he might have.
Logan Paulson was saying maybe that was going on too. Apparently he was unhappy, but couldn't figure out why he would be unhappy. That he pretty much had to understand when he came here that unless Sam fell on his face, he probably was going to be the backup. But I think we're going to see a good kick return from young Mr. Allen, and I think that's going to help his cause greatly. And I don't think we're going to see 30 passes in 39 plays. I think we're going to see a lot of run to see if we can get that going. And I'm hoping that Jack Del Rio says we're stopping the run this week. I don't care who's playing. We're not getting gashed again. That's kind of what I'm hoping to see.
I think it will be the Pringle show. I think Pringle's going to have like 125 yards receiving.
That would be cool.
I think a guy like Milne is feeling the heat of potentially losing a roster spot. Maybe he steps up and makes a few plays here and there, if given the opportunity, obviously.
And not to circle back, I know we're trying to shut it down, but we were hard on Brissett for how he played, at least on one of those interceptions. I haven't heard anybody else talk about this, but I think on the one down near the Ravens 10-yard line to Bates, I don't think that was on him. I think Bates was supposed to sit down, and I think he drifted towards the sideline. I think Brissett threw that ball exactly where he wanted it to go, and he didn't call out his tight end. I think Mr. Bates is having a horrible preseason. I don't think he helped his cause at all. I think that was on him, and that the team doesn't talk about it. And Brissett's not going to call him out, but that looked like an NFL quarterback throwing the ball exactly where he wanted to throw it.
And that's 2 weeks in a row where Bates has
Yeah,
seemingly not done what he needed to do. Right,
he has not stepped up like I was hoping to see him step up this preseason.
So maybe a surprise cut.
Depends on who all gets released, right? There's going to be some viable NFL tight ends on the streets.
I think that depends on, and I think that depends on Logan Thomas. If Logan Thomas is healthy and Turner proves to be capable of blocking, I think they could decide to move on from Bates, and then you keep maybe you keep Alex Arma as your tight end, your fullback, who can be like an H-back type, and then or you keep Hodges, right?
Yeah, I'd like to see another flash from Hodges. I bet you he gets some playing time again this week.
I think we see a big game from Chris Rodriguez Jr.
And
Any
with
more?
that,
Yep.
ladies and gentlemen, thank you for hanging with us.
Yep. All right, boys, that's 90 minutes. I think it's time to put a cork in it, huh?
Deal.
All right, gentlemen. Good to look forward to seeing you next week. We'll have a lot more questions answered and probably some new ones that we can debate. Night,
Night all.
fellas.
Cheers.